The New Orleans Saints' new offensive system should lead to greater production in 2024 for Derek Carr and the Saints offense by increasing the simplicity on their side while leveling up the complexity for opposing defenses. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're taking a look at how the New Orleans Saints' new offensive system, which will be widely referred to as a wide zone system, but more details on that in a moment, impact the New Orleans Saints' most important position at quarterback with Derek Carr. We're going to be taking a look at how the Saints need to continue to add the right talent in order to really be able to maximize this. We'll take a look at how protection could get some help in 2024 to make Derek Carr's job a little bit easier. But we're going to start off with the conversation here about is it more important for Derek Carr to fit into the system, or does the system being brought in need to be one that already fits Derek Carr? I'm going to give you my thoughts on that and much more as we continue on with today's episode. Appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day here on the Locked On Saints podcast and for being an everydayer here as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use that promo code Locked On NFL. New promo code there, Locked On NFL, for $20 off of your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed over at Game Time. Go and download the Game Time app. So when asking the question, is it more important that the quarterback fits the system or that the system is brought in that already fits the quarterback? I have a pretty clear opinion on that. And for me, it is the latter. And for the New Orleans Saints, it's going to be on full display in 2024 because the intent of bringing in the wide zone offense, and we'll call it the Kubiak wide zone offense. I'll explain here in just a second what I mean by that. Is to simplify things on the offensive side while making things at least appear more complex for the opposing defense. This is the trend around the NFL, and that is what is most important. And now, in order for you to be able to do that, you have to bring in a system that you feel confident that your quarterback is going to be able to run. It's not about finding the right quarterback that fits the system. You find the quarterback that has the traits that you like, that plays the game that you like, that manages the game the way that you like as a coaching staff, not necessarily as a fan base. I get it, but I'm talking about as a coaching staff here. You have to bring in the quarterback that gets all of those things done and checks all of those boxes. For the New Orleans Saints, Derek Carr is that quarterback. And so bringing in the system here with Clint Kubiak coming from the San Francisco 49ers and also his experience with the Denver Broncos and I almost call them the Minneapolis Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings, his dad, Gary Kubiak, long-time, very successful offensive coordinator in the NFL as well. All of those pieces are, and all the reasons that the Saints decided to bring that system in come down to what works best for Derek Carr. So the Saints found the system that they feel will work best with their offense and with their quarterback. Now, the biggest thing is being able to leverage it. How do they actually find the success that they want from Derek Carr, from the offense, with this new scheme, with this new play caller in tow? And that's where we get to simplicity versus complexity. And the way that the wide zone offense evolves over time is that every single wide zone offense kind of does things their own way. McVay did a little bit different than Shanahan. Shanahan kind of stopped doing it last year in 2023. We saw Bobby Slowick take it over to Houston for CJ Stroud, did it slightly different. Mike McDaniel took it over to the Miami Dolphins, did a little bit different. LaFleur took it over to the Packers, did a little bit different, right? So when we talk about a wide zone offense, we're not talking about one specific offense. We're talking about effectively a basis for an offense, right? The foundation for an offense. And so that foundation we broke down in last Thursday's episode, taking a look at the run game. That's really where the wide zone offense gets its name, right? It's about running the wide zone concepts, and those concepts oftentimes are outside zone runs, things like that. So how does it impact a quarterback? Well, there's a couple of different things. So the first of which is that we're talking about simplicity versus complexity, right? And so you want to be simple over on your side. You want to keep things simple, manageable, predictable on your side while keeping things unpredictable, unmanageable, and complex on the defensive side. So that's where a lot of this, what we call eye candy, comes in. So in the passing game, you're going to see a lot of that motion before plays, and you're going to see a lot of the same motion before run plays, because then it helps to disguise whether or not it's a run or a pass for the defense. But that motion ends up identifying the defense for you, right? If a wide receiver goes in motion from one side to the other and back, and a defensive back follows that player, on the defensive side, you're in man coverage. If no defensive back follows, but the defense just shifts, you're in zone coverage, right? That's what you're looking at least what the pre-snap look is. Then you're able to take the snap. You can employ more eye candy if you want to, with play action, jet sweeps, split zone release, sweep actions, things like that, to where players are, getting faked the ball, or at least are crossing behind the line of scrimmage, and there's the potential that they might get the ball on a shovel pass, and then that maybe crashes some of these linebackers down and then opens up the middle of the field for the crosser to hit over the middle. That becomes really effective if you're also winning in the run game in the first place, because then those linebackers and the players that are in the box are kind of on high alert from that point. So that's just one of many examples of how to create complexity by giving an opposing defense a lot to look at before the snap, even right after the snap in certain cases, but then creating simplicity on your side by opening up the easiest area of the field to target, the middle of the field, or diagnosing what that defense is doing pre-snap and using the play action to stall that defense. You see what I'm saying? Every one of those things makes the quarterback's job easier. When a man follows in motion or doesn't follow in motion, you're showing what at least the pre-snap coverage looks like, zone or man. When you run that play action and you pull down some of those linebackers or safeties, you're opening up areas of the field that can then be targeted by that quarterback. If you're opening up those areas of the field in the middle of the field, it's all developing right in front of the quarterback's eyes. You're not having to turn over a shoulder or look to the perimeter. It's happening right in front of them. So then the next piece becomes the protection and making sure that the throwing lanes are open. But you see what I mean? All of these pieces help to just make the game more simple on the offensive side because of the complexity and the challenge you're presenting the defensive side of the football. So those are just 3 small examples on things that you can do on a single play. And then things get more and more advantageous from there. If you're using things like the sneak motion that we've seen, or the speed motion that we've seen kind of sweep the NFL over the course of the last year. That's when a player typically starts from the slot or from the inside of a trip set when there's 3 receivers on one side. Before the snap starts to sprint to the outside, at the snap turns upfield and basically is already running at full speed or at top end speed, and then gets downfield and things like that. I asked several players in the New Orleans Saints locker room last year if that's a motion that they've seen and something that they would love to see incorporated. And I got a unanimous yes when it came to that question, because it's just another one of those wrinkles that creates havoc for an opposing defense and creates a little bit of an advantage for the offense, because you get that running start that you get in like the Canadian Football League that you don't get in American football. And so all of these little pieces are pieces of not necessarily just the wide zone concept, but the innovative way that wide zone offenses kind of allow you to be able to incorporate more motion, incorporate more play action because of what your run game poses as a threat through its wide zone approach. So that ends up benefiting the passing game and simplifies the game a bit for the quarterback. And oh, by the way, if your run game is working, that inherently makes things better for your quarterback too, because it's another way for you to move the ball without it always being up to the quarterback to get that done. And it will still be up to the quarterback to get that done in the right situations. And a big thing about that is going to be protecting that quarterback. So let's take a look at protection here for the quarterback and how things might get a little bit of assistance from other positions based upon what we've seen from other wide zone offenses around the NFL. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This show is sponsored by Betterhelp. Give yourself a little check-in real quick. Ask yourself a quick question. How's your social battery doing? Does the idea of being around a whole bunch of people make you feel good? Or is it something that you kind of dread? I'll be honest, I go in between. I've bailed on plans and things like that because my anxiety just didn't allow me to feel comfortable being around a big group of people, things like that. But ever since I really started to kind of dive into that part of my life in therapy, I've gotten a lot of help with it. And you can too. Look, if you've been thinking about trying therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It is designed to be entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, completely suited to your schedule. No waiting in traffic, no sitting in waiting rooms, no awkward interactions. It's just you and your therapist on a computer, on a phone call, whatever it is that you're most comfortable with. It's flexible. It's built to cater to your needs. So find your social sweet spot today with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, family. Derek Carr might be getting some help when it comes to protection, and it wouldn't necessarily be coming from just the offensive line, but also from the tight end position. And this could have a big impact if the New Orleans Saints wide zone offense went this particular route on their draft plans in 2024 as well. We appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. Hey, don't forget, on Wednesday, April 17th, tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, the Locked On NFL mock draft drops. Every team's first round selection, every team's first selection if they don't pick in the first round. Rumor has it one of your favorite teams might be picking multiple times in the first round, or at least is having those conversations. So if you want to see what I did and what the rest of our experts here at the Locked On Podcast Network did in this year's NFL mock draft, you're going to be able to watch it as it premieres live over on Locked On Sports Today on the YouTube channel, Locked On Sports Today. And you can also find it on the free Amazon TV Fire Channels app. So you can find it there as well. On the 17th, April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time if you want to check that out. All right. So the New Orleans Saints could take a page out of a playbook that's not necessarily Kyle Shanahan's, but is of the Kyle Shanahan tree. So there's a couple of different things that we should layer in here, and it's the expectations for how a wide zone offense is going to work. And as I mentioned before, Mike McDaniel does a little differently in Miami than Shanahan did it in San Francisco before he changed and started introducing a lot more gap stuff. Sean McVay did the same, started introducing a lot more gap, particularly ISO runs where you're trying to isolate that linebacker. And if the linebacker in the middle of the field goes one way, then you go the other gap. If it goes the other way, you hit the other gap. It's kind of a two-gap run plan and things like that. That is very effective. And I hope that the New Orleans Saints incorporate in their offense, especially for Jamal Williams, who I think would benefit from that. And a Kendre Miller, who's got really, really good vision in the middle of the field as well. So there's all of those little things that are slight nuances and things like that. But everything kind of operates on the basis of the wide zone, quote unquote, offense, which basically just means that the run game loves to go outside. Not basically means that, but it's like the crown jewel of the run game, of the wide zone offense. So one of the things that Mike McDaniel did over in Miami that I thought was really interesting, and I'm curious to see if it was something that he brought from San Francisco to Miami, then it could be something that Clint Kubiak brings from San Francisco to Miami, or Clint Kubiak as somebody that is watching all of these wide zone offenses and watching, which are all offshoots of his dad's old offense that was built with Mike Shanahan back in the day. And so what parts is he looking at potentially stealing? And there's one element, which is the tight end double team, that I think could be really interesting to steal from Miami and incorporate in this offense. And when I talk about the tight end double team, I know what you're thinking. Oh, yeah, okay, well, you get the tight end to help chip with the offensive tackle, and then that ends up being the rush plan for a specific edge rusher. That's one way to look at it. Mike McDaniel does something really interesting, though. So he'll come out in a wing formation, which basically just means your 5 offensive linemen and then a tight end on either side. Wherever the premier pass rusher is lined up, the tight end opposite that will motion from the opposite side to the same side as that pass rusher. And then that pass rusher gets double teamed, not by the offensive tackle and tight end. They'll double team with the 2 tight ends. Now, there's still a situation here to where you go, okay, well, it's an edge rusher on 2 tight ends, but listen, it's still 1 body on 2 bodies, right? And so it still makes that edge rusher's job a lot harder. And they do this a lot. They do this often. And it has worked a ton to keep pressure off of Tua Tagovailoa, which has allowed them to be able to have and take advantage of all of that speed on their offense, right? You can have all the speed that you want. You still have to wait for concepts downfield to develop. And, you've got a Tyreek Hill, you've got a Jalen Waddle, you have these fast flying guys. defenses are just going to back their safeties up and back their safeties up and back their safeties up. And it's still going to be tough to always create that level of separation immediately. You still have to wait for concepts to develop, for receivers to be schemed open, all those other things. And so when I saw the Saints bring in Cedric Wilson, who has spent time, the wide receiver, who has spent time in Miami, one of the things that I really thought about was expanding that offensive line. You put the big slot guy back in there, and then that big slot guy not only becomes a big target for you in the middle of the field operating out of the slot, but they become another blocker, and it expands your offensive line laterally out towards the sidelines a bit further, which is super helpful with your run game, especially in that wide zone, outside zone run game where you're trying to get to the outside and all that. When you have one of those slot blockers that can really hold it down and just obliterate a nickel, that's a whole other pathway for your running back. That's a whole other run lane for your running back. So the other place where that helps out is that maybe you don't necessarily see that in the passing game because you need that receiver running a route. But if you're able to motion another tight end over, and then you get both Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau blocking the same edge rusher, and it frees up that offensive tackle to pull to the opposite side or to get upfield, whatever it might be, there's a lot of fun stuff that you can do with that. And if nothing else, it simply buys you more time as a quarterback to allow things to develop on what could be an otherwise what would be an otherwise 3-man route, right? You got the 2 receivers and then the running back that would be running out of that 12 personnel if both tight ends are occupied blocking. So you would need time to allow those to be able to develop. So certainly something that the New Orleans Saints could look at a different wide zone approach or a differing wide zone approach, an ever evolving wide zone approach, and steal from it. And then you could also utilize that in your run game as well in obvious ways. But this is another way that the game impacts the quarterback, right? You get offensive linemen building a lot of confidence because they're tearing up defensive lines and defenses in the zone run where they get to be mobile, they get to be athletic, they get up to the second level and get to block smaller bodies and just build more and more confidence. And then that ends up having a big old impact when it comes to your pass protection. One of the things that I love about the Trevor Penning to guard conversation is that everybody always kind of talks about, oh, put Trevor Penning at guard because him operating in a smaller space will end up, benefiting him and things like that. I don't agree with that, but I'll tell you what I do love about him being a guard. He gets to pull, get outside, get a head start, and gets to lay out some linebackers and build some confidence. You can do that in the trap game, in your run game with the tackle as well. So there's a lot of different ways to build that confidence. But anyway, a little bit of an aside there. But the main thing that I'm bringing to the attention here is the more that you win in the run game as a blocker, the more confidence you build as a pass blocker, right? And so you can carry that on all throughout the game. So there's a lot of different ways that you really like the ideas of building up that confidence and buying more protection so that your quarterback has time to be able to watch things develop. So that's another way that Derek Carr is impacted by this offense or some version of this offense, if that's a principle that they decide to take. And that also impacts their draft plans too, because I still think that drafting a tight end makes a lot more sense. But if you're looking for a guy that's going to be able to handle those double team blocks, blockers like Tanner McLaughlin out of Arizona, Tip Ryman out of Illinois, like maybe they become the better tight end targets than a Theo Johnson out of Penn State, who's a bit more of a pass catcher, though he was really the first one to show good blocking prowess during the combine until McLaughlin and Tip Ryman blew the sleds up and all those other things. But maybe guys like that end up being just as good fits in the 5th, 6th round and have a real impact immediately as an extra blocker for this New Orleans Saints offense. So just something to keep an eye out on. Not one wide zone offense is like every other wide zone offense, and there are small principles that you're going to be able to steal from others and small new principles that you'll be able to develop yourself as Clint Kubiak as well. So that's another way that this could end up really impacting in a positive way Derek Carr and impacts the quarterback position with this new offense. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at adding talent from here. How do you continue to make a quarterback's job easier? Well, go get him more weapons. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is my absolute favorite place to go and buy tickets because of a couple of different things. But look, let me give you just a solid example real quick. There's a play-in tournament game tonight that will determine the future of the New Orleans Pelicans as a playoff team here in 2024. $20 tickets, $20, $22, $23, $24. I know folks that have gotten box seats at baseball games for $20 as well. And look, you can even see the view from your seat before you buy the ticket. And all of those prices that I just mentioned, all in pricing. It shows you the total up front with no surprise at checkout. I absolutely love Game Time. And of course, they've also got flash deals, zone deals, and much more. So you got to go and check them out, including, of course, the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take all the guesswork and concern out of buying tickets by heading over to Game Time today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the new promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. If the New Orleans Saints want to continue to make things better for Derek Carr with this new offensive system, one way to go about it, and the very next step, is adding more talent on the offensive side of the football. That is the next step for them. And speaking of the next steps, don't forget, we are your team every day, and we're going through our wide zone breakdown, looking at the different iterations of wide zone offenses and how they impact each position. So today we're looking at quarterback. Tomorrow we're going into running back, which is going to be a very big deep dive, looking at Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller, rookies that potentially fit this scheme in, coming into this year's NFL draft, all of that. So we're doing running backs tomorrow, wide receivers and tight ends on Thursday, and then we're on to the offensive line on Friday. We'll also keeping you up to date with all of the biggest stories around the New Orleans Saints as well. We do have one news update for you today, but before we get to that, I do want to take a look here at adding the right talent around Derek Carr. So this is the next piece, right? As we go through the rest of the week, we're going to catalog the way that this system ends up being positively impactful for other positions, okay? Skill positions, offensive line, all that. So what that also means is that this is now a scheme that benefits players. And so you want to make sure that you get the right players, the athletic offensive linemen, the yards after catch receivers, the zone run, good vision, good speed running backs, adding more speed on this offense as well. Getting the blocking and security that you need from the tight end position, but also getting yourself a pass catcher at the tight end position. That can be a problem for opposing defenses. That could be Juwan Johnson. They could go another angle with that. We'll figure out exactly which way it is that they want to go. But when you have the system that can support the players, the next thing to do is to make sure you got the players that have the top talent available to them that can be bolstered, found, unlocked, developed, fostered, however it is that you want to look at it, by that very system. So that's the next piece for me when it comes to this. You got the coach, you got the scheme, you got the play caller, you've got the quarterback that you want as the New Orleans Saints. Now, can you add the pieces around to be able to help to maximize that so that the quarterback maximizes the system, the quarterback maximizes the talent of the players maximize the system, the players maximize the talent of the quarterback, and then the system maximizes the talent of both. You're looking at trying to take that triumvirate, that trifecta, and making sure that everything is feeding into everything else. So you got to find the right talent to go along with this team. We took a look at 16 different wide receivers in yesterday's episode that could fit what it is that the New Orleans Saints are looking for. If you're looking at running backs and things like that, Cody Schrader, the running back out of Missouri, one of the best zone running backs in this year's class, that could be a way that the New Orleans Saints could potentially go by continuing to bolster their running back room as well, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different ways. We'll look at each individual position and players that could potentially come in and have an impact immediately over the course of the rest of the week. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that adding the right talent around the players and around the system is still to be done and still a work in progress. The Saints are not in a situation where they can dust off their hands now and say, okay, got the play caller, got the system, got the quarterback that we like, and got some players. Go get more. Go get more. And that's why, like, the NFL draft is very important, of course, and adding that talent over in the offensive line. The thing that I love about the conversations around the New Orleans Saints so far this offseason is that getting a new offensive lineman in the draft, for instance, seems to be, of course, the thing that we're all all of our barometers are pointing in that direction. Barometers? Compasses. Sorry. All of our compasses are pointing in that direction. But then there's a contingent of people that kind of discuss it and say, well, if they do that, they're giving up on Trevor Penning. They shouldn't do that. That's not necessarily true. Like, the best case scenario for the New Orleans Saints is that they go and they grab somebody that is a true offensive lineman that has a lot of versatility. They can play on either side of the line. They can play in multiple areas on the line, all of that. And then Trevor Penning pans out at left tackle. Now, do they want to risk that, or do they want to go and get a bona fide left tackle in this year's class? They should have both options available to them when they're on the board at 14, or on the clock rather, at 14 in this year's NFL draft. But if they drafted a Troy Fautanu out of Washington or a Talise Fuaga out of Oregon State, those guys can play multiple positions. They come in and maybe compete at left tackle. But if Trevor Penning cleans up and says, hey, in this new system, which is very run heavy, allows me to move, builds my confidence, lets me get on some of these smaller guys and blow those guys up in the middle of the field or whatever, like throw them out the club, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, like that mentality starts to come back, that attack mentality. Then I think that if that ends up showing you something, then you can move a Fautano to have him start at left guard. If Ryan Ramchik's not ready, Fuaga could start at right tackle. You can move these guys around. So that's one way to go. The other way to go is to go out there and just get yourself the bona fide left tackle in Olu Fashanu out of Penn State. He's a guy that could come in and immediately start for you at left tackle. And then if you want to, you could try to move Trevor Penning to right tackle, but then you're asking him to mirror everything. And it's basically like, like if you're right-handed and you've been right-handed and you're a right-handed pitcher, that's basically like going to your major league right-handed pitcher and say, okay, cool, great job. Now, thanks for throwing that perfect game. Tomorrow, throw with your left hand only, right? Like that's what that feels like when you talk to a lot of these guys that have been asked to switch sides and all these other pieces. The other thing that you could do is potentially look at moving him inside. Then you're asking him to do something he's never done before, but you could build his confidence by having him as a puller and counters and all these other things. And I'm not fully against that. I just don't know if he'll pan out at the position. So you'd have to figure all that out. So it's a combination when it comes to finding the right talent, right? It's a combination between attaining or acquiring new talent, or looking at the talent that you have and properly evaluating them to make sure that they land in the position that will best suit them. And I think that that's something that the New Orleans Saints can use and continue to approach. The other one that I look at a lot is wide receiver, right? I mean, we talk about this all the time. The Saints need a yards after catch receiver, and a guy like Malachi Corley, who led the nation in that, and who was, an average of like 9.6 yards after catch per reception, which was not top of the nation, but he had like the highest overall number. And over 39% avoided missed tackle rate and all these other things, which is the best in this year's class. These are the things that you want to add to this offense to make sure that you can simplify the game a little bit more. You can have a quarterback throw a 6-yard pass that goes for 60 yards, or you can have that quarterback throw a 50-yard pass, a 40-yard pass that goes for 60 yards, and the result is the same. You know what I mean? The result is entirely the same. It's still a 60-yard completion. It's still a 60-yard catch and run. It's still a 60-yard touchdown, whatever it might be. It's all the same metrics-wise. The only thing is that maybe the catch and run's a little bit more exciting. I asked Lynn Bowden this question last year. I asked him, what would you rather? Would you rather catch a pass, catch a 40-yard deep ball or a 60-yard deep ball, or would you rather catch a 4-yard pass that you turn into a 60-yard touchdown? And he immediately said, 4-yard pass that I turn into a 60-yard touchdown. Like, he wants to have that highlight. He wants to have that fun. And so if you can find the guys that can do that, that's exactly what it is that they want to do, much like Bowden wants to do that because he can do that. So those are the things that you're looking at, or has the skill set to do that. And so those are the things that you're looking at in terms of adding the right talent. And then comfort in the zone run scheme and all these other things. But biggest thing is, can you find the athletes? And I think that that's what the New Orleans Saints need to do when they go into this draft. Quick news things for you. The New Orleans Saints brought back defensive back Shamar Jean-Charles, who played just over 65 snaps for the team on special teams last year and contributed well from that perspective. 1-year deal. He's coming back in, get an opportunity to continue to challenge. This does not have anything to do with Marshawn Lattimore. Please do not make that correlation. This is another special teams guy after losing a bunch of special teams guys that could potentially give you some play there and compete there during training camp. And we'll see how it goes post training camp. Appreciate you. As always, y'all, don't forget we're looking at running backs in tomorrow's episode and the impact of the wide zone offense on the ones on the New Orleans Saints roster and the ones they could potentially add that can have an immediate impact. We appreciate you very much. As always, make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. Make sure you go and check out Locked On Pelicans today for your second listen. We did a live show over at Mid-City Yacht Club. It was super fun. Aaron Summers, team reporter, was there. Will Guillory from The Athletic was there. Rel Myers from relmyers.com, Pels 12, and much more, all there as well, along with Jake. So make sure you go and check out that fun listen today. Appreciate you as always for making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.